He accepted his arrest with surprising resignation. "So I'm arrested," he said, "because of Scott's information. I knew that the governor would send for me." If he knew, why did he try it on? Had he not been warned on the Bellerophon to what he laid himself open by beginning a clandestine correspondence? Had he not, upon 2 occasions, yielded in writing to the restrictions which England imposed upon those who wished to live with the emperor? By breaking that rule, did he not know what he incurred? And it was through a mulatto slave, whose father was English and a loyalist, that he conceived the idea of sending documents signed in his name, copied by his son, the text of which could have been drawn up only by him, and was of such a nature that ultimate publicity was inevitable. The letter to Prince Lucian contained the story of events from the departure from Malmaison up to the month of August 1816. This story took the form of a pamphlet rather than a recital of events. It was stilted and contained very little truth. The letter to Lady Clavering compromised her and Lord Holland, to whom Las Casas announced having previously sent a parcel for Prince Lucian. By it, Las Casas justified the fears expressed by the ambassadors on the subject of the journals. "Have you someone," he asked Lady Clavering, "to write to me at your dictation?" He could insert articles of the Times and the Morning Chronicle, the appearance of which would tell us that my letter had reached you. In conclusion, he disclosed that notes hidden in articles of clothing had in this way reached the hands of the prisoners. It might be said that on one strip of silk, Las Casas had gathered together all the charges that could be made against him. Furthermore, everything in this story was very improbable. The proposal of James Scott, confidence of Las Casas had immediately placed in him the utter impossibility of Scott's delivering the letter intended for Lucian Bonaparte in Rome, the little urgency and mediocre importance of these documents for which Las Casas was hazarding his own expulsion and the execution of his old servant. Las Casas, without a doubt, made it known that on a piece of this same silk he had already got into Europe the emperor's protest against the treaty of August 2nd. He even declared that he had sent it to Lord Holland, but it cannot be credited that this was how the latter first knew of it, should that which might have succeeded under different circumstances with the connivance of an Englishman and with the approval and by order of Napoleon having been attempted as a supreme throw with no possible chance of success and with neither the authorization nor the sanction of the emperor to send to Europe a document affecting neither the policy, the glory, nor the life of Napoleon, and the sole aim of which must have been to put the name of Las Casas before the public, which was the most likely conjecture that the letters would reach Lady Clavering and Lucian Bonaparte, and that the latter would give the widest publicity to that sent to him in the Diario Romano, in the papers of the Two Sicilies, or in those of the Lombard Venetian kingdom? Or the alternative supposition, a very likely one, that Scott, even if he was not an agent provocateur, would be apprehended with his taffeta messages, an assumption Las Casas had not entertained. Since the general reunion at Longwood, he had found life there intolerable. He had been the sole companion of the emperor at the Briars, working and discoursing with him, spending the whole day and often the night listening to the story of his amazing career. When Gourgaud had joined the emperor at the Briars, the charm of that intimacy had been somewhat shattered, but it was not definitely destroyed until the beginning of the residence of Longwood. Such a small part did the Las Casas play, so religiously did the father hold to the tenets of duty, rank, and prerogative, so little seen was the son, almost ceaselessly engrossed in his writing, to which an older man might have succumbed, and by which he had nearly ruined his own health, that there had been on the part of Gourgaud and the Massons, once avowed associates, insults, at first implied, but later open, perpetual opposition, and finally abuse which might have aroused a less stout-hearted man to take up arms. The worst coroners had been good enough at Longwood for father and son, and the latter had been requested to take his meals with Piakovsky, the suspected Pole. Each one wanted to consider his period of history, whether or not he was capable of managing it, in place of repeated dictations, little by little building up the complete narrative, instead of a carefully prosecuted sequence in which memory was resorted to and elaborated upon. There was a division at the period so far separated that a great effort was necessary each time to recall them, to string them together, and to effect any degree of accuracy, instead of a narrative in which it was impossible not to recognize the touch of the master, and in which secretarial collaboration was only obvious in certain minor details, in the unanimity of opinion, and in its connecting links. There were 4 different means of absorbing thought as suggesting its expression. The dictation, so precise in itself, always gave the impression of revision, and in this work each one worked according to his own method, incorporating in it his own peculiar merits and shortcomings, to the detriment of the embryo conception and to the smooth sequence of the work. The greatest mistake of this quadruple collaboration was that it wearied the emperor by its continuous toil, and even before he had started his reign, he had to interrupt the narrative only to begin again the last turns of fortune, explaining that he was not responsible for the disaster of Waterloo. Las Casas had therefore, in this collective work, only a quarter of the confidence, and that was surely the most painful disillusionment he could have experienced, not taking part in the plots of those who shared the emperor's table, scorning the intrigues of Masson, as well as the passions of Gourgaud, and yet being unable, like the Grand Marshal, to find a little peace in his own residence, having had no other motive than to win the emperor's confidence, having made no other endeavor to implore his usefulness than in recording his dictations and collecting his utterances. He might consider that if he was successful in the first instance, he soon miscarried in the second, in that he was prosecuting a work that concerned Napoleon and not himself. It was not, however, the same in the case of his own journal, for in that he was so closely bound up with the emperor that it was impossible to separate them. Napoleon did the talking, but he had a conversationalist in the person of Las Casas. Las Casas replied, but did not refrain from introducing his own opinions, narrating the story of his life, of extolling his atlas, of setting his devotion to advantage. He recorded these sayings, and the manuscript attained enormous proportions. If during a little less than 2 years he had filled 4,000 pages, how many would that have reached in 10 years if the captivity and life of the emperor lasted so long? He experienced weariness, languor, and ennui. It was not supposed that Las Casas had gone so far as to hasten his own departure by being deliberately caught in the act, but that he had wittingly risked deportation for very little possibility of advantage and success. Otherwise, it might be doubted whether this 50-year-old man was quite his right mind. But despite the temporary eclipse of his favor, he was the emperor's most useful companion, the only one whose conversation was agreeable to him, the only one who could fill his idle moments and act as a balm to his troubled spirit. He alone, Bertrand himself from 1766, Bertrand from 1773, were old enough to recall the events which interested the emperor, and since Bertrand, busy with his wife and children, only saw the emperor's stated times and for particular purposes, Las Casas was always there, and his conversation was not bound up like that of the Grand Marshal with the discipline of 20 years standing. Everyone experienced his attitude at Longwood and outside Longwood, and the kind of rage it aroused against Las Casas, the Monslez, and Gourgaud made it very evident. Las Casas was the only man indispensable to the emperor because he was the only man who kept alive the exile's interest in life, both past life and his present.